Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thanks for joining us. I've got to say, starting off, the deck's loaded against us, right? Because we're looking at different wine critics and their various palates, two different vintages, 18 and 19, and different varietals in two very different countries. So having said that, it's still going to be a fairly indulgent treat to be able to look at all of these wines now. They were opened at 5 o'clock this morning, were decanted for 5 hours, and then poured into the various jars. So they've had a little bit of time, a little bit of work. It's quite interesting to notice how the phenolics vary between the 5 of them. Some are just giving so much more than others. And that's going to be for a number of factors. Can you guys see the slideshow? Hopefully you can. Hopefully, where are we? Come on. Screen's just gone blank on me. Yeah, I think you can. So where is the screen? Let's go back. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Okay, we'll just do it like that. If you can't see the screen properly, let me know. So going from left to right, we're starting with the 3 Californians, Continuum, Dalla, Valle, Maya, Opus One. And then we're looking at 3 Super Tuscans, all with various influences of Sangiovese, Merlot, and Cabernet. The Napa wines are all Cab dominant to varying degrees, and I'll drill down into that in a second. Certainly, of the three Californians, the Opus is the wine with the most predominance of Cabernet. It's got 84%, with 6% Petit Verdot, 6 Merlot, 5 Cab Franc, and 4 Malbec. The Continuum, only 54% Cabernet, and then 30% Cab Franc. One of my weaknesses in life, certainly Cab Franc, 9% Petit Verdot, and 6 Merlot. And then number 3, the Dalla Valle Cabernet, is 60% Cabernet and 40% Cab Franc. Now, it's interesting because that over time has evolved. They haven't always stuck to that particular mix, but at the moment, obviously the Cabernet Franc must be looking better than the rest, looking better than normal, which is why they've upped that percentage. It's certainly the most expensive. The Dalla is certainly the most expensive of the 6 that we're looking at tonight. So maybe let's look at the first 3 as a set, see how they look, and then we'll move on to the Italians. I'm using these stemless riedels, and for me, the Continuum is offering the most in terms of phenolics. I don't know how they're looking in your glasses. Yeah, the Dalla is certainly the most shy of the 2 on the nose. 60% Cab. So the Continuum and the Dalla are pretty much the same percentage of Cabernet, give or take 5%, 6%. The Opus is giving much of the nose that I'm kind of used to in previous vintages of Opus. Admittedly, the big thing is we're looking at these wines super early, right? There's great viscosity, particularly in the first 2. I'd suggest that maybe the viscosity in the Continuum and the Dalla Valle is probably higher or better or more obvious than in the Opus. Yeah, tonight's not a night for spitting. I try to because I'm doing so many tastings at the moment, but not tonight. Interesting stuff on the continuum. The one marker that this is now a 100-point score from Suckling. Suckling's generally, I think with the exception of one wine tonight, the most bullish in terms of ratings. This is his 100-pointer. The Opus is 99 points, and the Maya is from Suckling. I know I've got that somewhere 98. So that's interesting. Wine Advocate actually has given a higher score to the Dalla Valle than Suckling. If I was looking at these numbers without tasting the wines and possibly knowing a little bit about what pleases Suckling versus Advocate, and I think it's Monica Lana who looked at it for Advocate. Lana looks for something that's possibly a little bit less flamboyant in the earlier stages. It's something that seems to, she's more of a classicist in terms of the wines that she really reaches for, relative to Suckling, who seems to respond maybe to more markers that are reaching out of the glass, more demanding or more urgent in style. The interesting thing about 2018, the words unicorn, perfect are bandied about by the wineries. Normally, I look on that as some aggressive marketing, but in this instance, there's so many people, wine critics and winemakers alike, who are saying the same thing, that I'm tending to buy into it. The other thing to note is that what's interesting about these three cabs is that the Continuum has the highest altitude of the three. The Opus sits at 250 meters, and the Continuum is the highest, and Dalla Valle is only at 100 meters above sea level. So that represents possibly the warmest influence, and altitude component is less impactful in the Dalla Valle. Probably going to find a bit more fertility in the soils, although when I drill down into the tasting notes, the one thing that binds these three wines together, not so much the soil type, but the absolute dearth of organic matter. The thing that they have in similar in benchmark is really poor soils. The whole knowledge and the whole assumption behind that being that from this poverty of fertility comes real character in wines, and it's something that seems to bind them all together. The Continuum, let's look a little bit more closely now. The other points for these three is there's a varying degrees of it, but sufficient degrees of it in the soils for them all to reference it. Iron, so iron-rich or iron-rich components in the soil. Yeah, there's one marker in Continuum that I look for every year when I try. I'm lucky enough to maybe had the last 5 or 6 years of this. There's a kind of silky, satiny kind of top texture to the wine that seems to flow through for everything, and I'm certainly getting that on the nose here. In fact, I would say that that's probably the most evolved or the most finessed nose of the three Napas. Violets, really finished, very beautiful. Thinking back to 16, I don't think I had 17, but 16, 15 and earlier, they came across more robust at an early stage than this. There's a sense of finish in this wine at a super early stage that in the recollection of the previous few vintages wasn't so obvious at this early stage. Definitely violets, roses. Probably one of the best I've ever tasted from them. There's a finesse to it already that just wasn't in the earlier examples. Dalla Valle, the most expensive of the bunch, certainly not the most expensive in Napa. I've just been evaluating for our marketplace sale next month, just extraordinarily high prices for some of the super Napa labels. It's interesting to see how that Opus has gone up. The very first year that we started the business, I was evaluating Opus, landed in Hong Kong for $150. So that was 12 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that. Admittedly, there was an oversupply in Hong Kong that year, but it's an extraordinary increase in price over the last decade or so. I think in terms of production levels, they're quite coy about how much they produce. And most of these super premium people are a bit like that, with the exception of the Maya, Dalla Valle. I was going to call it Maya from now on. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. They only do 500 cases. And even so, I think that might be 500 six-packs. So it's tiny, tiny, tiny production. In terms of corks, for me, the Continuum presented the best quality cork. Just when I was pulling them out, definitely had the best look to it. Possibly the Maya, the least impressive in terms of the density of the cork. Continuum also had a much longer length, and these are the things that I sort of look for at this price point. This is not to be ignored to any extent. If you look at the Australian context, where it's these days full-blown Stelvin, and they sort of thrown caution to the wind in terms of their super premium stuff, it's a different game. And I would hesitate to put a Grange 18 into this lineup in Stelvin next to the rest of it, because it's just going to look, they definitely in the early stages in particular are far younger and just less expressive than you're going to find in the cork. There's for me in the Maya, there's maybe a density. It's not quite as effortless as the Continuum for me on the palate. Yeah, it's by no means no fault, but it's got its elbows out for me, tannic wise. Certainly on the palate, it seems to be sitting. Please jump in if you have any comments or you think I'm talking nonsense, because I get told that quite regularly online anyway. Yeah, there's a evidence of dense powdery tannin in the Maya, just more tannin. Definitely not negative, but it's just very, very much quite muscular compared to the Continuum. I think with the Opus, more of that classic Bordeaux style, you know. I'd see a reference in the Opus closer to a French interpretation of these blends than the other two. Maybe that's got a lot to do with the fact that it's got so much Cabernet in it. It's sitting with 84% Cabernet relative to the other two. And again, that might be yeah, it's interesting. There's a beautiful cigar box kind of component to the oak. It's sort of gentle, but quite prevalent. Yeah, Sammy, I would have just said left bank for sure. Maybe not Pauillac, doesn't have that opulence of Pauillac. I'm not sure where I'd put it. Yeah, the Maya just seems to be a bit rough and ready, and it's not in a negative way, but it's got a very specific personality to it. And it's interesting because let me just check on the soils with the Maya. It might be slightly different soils. I think it was predominantly sandstone. Let me have a look. No, they just say very rocky. They don't actually reference the actuals. And then there's talk of iron content. They don't reference anything beyond that. Great family story. Now 3 generations on the farm. Michel Roland is the enologist for Maya. but Maya Klein is the surname, I think, is the winemaker. She's the second generation. Her mum started it all. They make several other lines. Her influences, according to what I read up about her, is that she's worked at Ornellaia, Masseto, and Latour, and those are pretty great influences in terms of where she's made wine in the past. I think Continuum would be the one. Continuum and Maya are definitely the least likely to be confused as Bordeaux. Just pushing them left, forward, and back.
What's the Continuum?
Sorry,
Rob, what's the Continuum blend?
Let me pull it up. 54 cab, 31 cab franc. The rest Verdot and Merlot. So that represents the lowest prevalence of Cabernet. The next 60% cab in the Maya and 84 in the Opus. I picked up some notes suggesting that the percentage of Cab Franc in the Maya seems to be higher than it was historically. So obviously those parcels are reacting differently to the heat. Certainly 2018 Napa was hot, there's no question about it. But the timing of rains prior and post bud burst were perfectly in sync. So it worked. They got the water at the right time. It was hot enough at an early time to see some interesting growth. 19 was different in Napa. I'm reading about split buds and a much harder vintage. When I ran some analysis against 2019 Napa, it seems that 18, certainly for this level of quality Cabernet, 18 is the better year. Any thoughts on a favorite out of these three before we look at the Italians?
I think the Continuum is a very pleasant surprise.
It bounces in, right? Just absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the Opus before, so this is not 18, but other into this, so I sort of knew what to expect. I was excited about the Maya, but I must be honest, given the scores, I don't see what others see, but that's okay. I'm a naive palate relative.
No, not at all. It's very relevant what you said. The one thing I'd strike out about the Maya is that its location, altitude-wise, is going to make a very different wine from the other two. It's definitely going to make something that's different. What gives me significant hope, and I think this is what the gurus are seeing it in the long term, there's not that over-ambulance of fruit and alcohol in the Maya. It's big and it's contained, though. I think it's super muscular, and I think that over time, a little bit like what the Bella Ridge does, or the Montellina to a lesser degree does for me. Whereas at an early stage, you think, what the hell is this about? But you take a 5 to 10 year view on it, and you see what the critics see eventually, and that's the argument that I'd make for Maya. I think the DNA is there, but we're not, in terms of right now enjoyment. Continuum brings it home for me. It really does, and in quite a positive way, Sam, because the Continuum normally is quite closed and quite stroppy at an early stage. That's been my experience of them. This is definitely the most. I think I've had the most I've drunk is of the 3s and 4s of Continuum, and this is far more nuanced and lacy, and it's really spectacular. Really impressed to see that. I guess at $450, it should be bringing the thunder, right?
Again, Rob, sorry, I was late to the party today, but yeah, what's the Cabernet in the Maya?
In the Maya, it's 60% cab, and then the rest Franc. So that's another thing, it doesn't have the Verdot, it doesn't have the Merlot, it doesn't have the other attributes that maybe bring a different personality to the wines. It's definitely a singular, dual blend sort of wine.
I've got to say, as I work it in the glass a lot more, it's becoming much more impressive. The Maya, that is. It's just work it in the glass, but it's hard to see. What is it? About $800 worth, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, it's hard to see.
But you know, Lou, the one argument I'd say is if I took my $800 and bought 3/4 of a bottle of Sine Qua Non or a glass and a half of Screaming Eagle, I think I'd drink this first.
Yeah, okay.
Because for me,
yeah,
it has more of a considered classicism about it versus those other huge superstar wines out of the same sort of part of town.
No, I agree with you. If you up the sharp, pointing into the plane like that, and you're making those comparisons, yes, I'd agree with you.
Yeah.
The Continuum, though, is a bit of a surprise. That's coming out of the box really well.
Yeah.
Right.
Just so eloquent at this stage. Really, by far the most impressive at an early stage that I've ever seen from that winery. Really great.
Yeah, to me, the Opus is by far, more consistent. I guess I've had more Opus than I've had of these other two. In fact, this is the first time I'm trying Maya, so it's a bit of a mystery to me. But the Opus is, well, they're consistent. That's what they're good at, right?
Yes.
Make it every year, year in, year out.
Yeah.
You could easily confuse it for a Bordeaux.
Well, it's interesting because it now sits at the same price as Penfolds 707. Let me think. Out of South America, there's probably no pure Cabernet that I can think of off the top of my head at that price point.
Not at that price point. You got Cheval, got Senya, but
they're cheaper, right? Yeah, they're a low price. No. I think that at the 500s, I'd probably lean into 707 2018 faster than I would this Opus, just for I think there's just something a little bit more star-studded about it at an early stage. I'm trying not to be Antipodean and waited in my judgment.
I wouldn't. I'd prefer this style. There's more to it than the straight Cabernet of the 707.
Right.
But what's the one that we always get wrong in blind tastings? I forget.
Out of Australia?
No, out of California. The most Bordeaux style of all of them, made by the Petrus guys. Yeah, come on, help me out here. Oh, come on.
I can't get online to see. So it's made by Petrus in Napa. Let me just do it on my phone. And we've drunk it together, have we?
1,000 times. They're made by the same family. Come on, everyone knows this one. White label. Sorry, my brain's just...
Montelina's not Petrus.
No, not Montelina. Bloody hell.
Petrus, Napa.
Made by Christian Chagnon.
Dominus. Yeah. Now that's an interesting call. Yeah.
Always nails it in blind tastings. No one ever picks it as California.
That's probably the most Bordeaux-esque of any Napa that I've had.
Yeah.
And up till relatively recently, I think that Dominus represented the best pricing in that superstar bracket.
Definitely.
I think the valuations that I've done for Marketplace in the last year, probably 200 to 300 a bottle, and for 3 or 4 years backdated vintage, and that represents really good buying. I think the last one I had with you was Burnt Ends. I remember we had it upstairs, Gordon and Co.
Yep.
It was great.
Yep. I mean, everyone, I assume, on the call is aware that Phelps has gone to the dark side now. They've been bought by LVMH. So no doubt the pricing of that will just go up 10% every year from now on. Yep. That's the model.
Yeah. Maybe not so much anymore. The tech guys are probably feeling a little poorer than they have in the last 10 years.
True. And also, if everyone's pricing US dollars to negotiate on, so I mean, that's in Europe, that's tough.
Yeah.
Singapore, not so bad because they've pegged the Singapore dollar pretty much. But in Europe or the UK,
All right, let's look at these three Tuscans. Also enjoying tremendous ratings success. The Luce, 45% Sanjo, the rest Merlot. The Castellare, they call it Sangiovese, but it's actually Sangiovese. It's the highest percentage, 85% Sangia. The rest Malvasia Nero, and then the
Malvasia.
Malvasia Nero, and then the Pupille number 6, 70% Cabernet. The rest Merlot and Petit Verdot. So possibly number 6 is going to show us the most Bordeaux-esque interpretation of the wine. Let's have a look.
I'm looking forward to this. I haven't tried these since April. These were stunning in April.
I'm very partial to these wines, so
well, look at the
I would
price
much rather buy the
differentials.
three on the right, multiples of them instead of anything on the left.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you're certainly looking it up on the screen, right? It's crazy if you look at the price comparisons. You 2.5 times.
And it's what's interesting. I mean, Rob, of course, knows this better than me, but there was not too long ago you could buy the Sodi for $60-$70.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? And
it was
okay,
in
maybe
the
there were
lifetime
100-point
of Wine
wines.
Exchange Asia, actually. It was in the last 10 years that prices changed. Yeah. It's interesting about the Sodi. It's a joint venture. I think it's Paolo Panarai's money, but the university's intellectual property. But it's the universities of Florence and Milan work with him on this particular vineyard project. It's also very interesting. It's 80 hectares, and it's the vineyards, hell of an incline, between 200 and 700 meters above sea level in various altitude markings for the vineyard. So it's extraordinary depth of character from the vineyard itself. And I was really fascinated to see that. It's certainly for me the shining star of Castellare, certainly the last few years, right, Lou? I think it's definitely been the one. The Merli is great, a bit more flashy, a fair bit more expensive, but this is the one that, for me, seems to drive it home every time.
Well, it's interesting because the dreaded La Place de Bordeaux has moved in on Castellare now. So, in fact, whereas before we would purchase everything directly from Castellare de Castellina, now the Sodi, which has become the flagship, which it wasn't before, but it's now the flagship, is only available to me via the French. So I actually buy this stuff now through La Place de Bordeaux.
Right.
For those who don't know, La Place is the general term for the trade union of merchants.
Consortium, monopoly of negotiants, maybe?
That one, yeah. The conglomeration of merchants. Of brokers, basically, out of France, who agreed to draw down portfolios of stock from the wineries sight unseen. So they take the risk, and therefore, on the basis that they get exclusive distribution. So for Castellare, it's normally what happens, like with Onalaya, they just take everything and they distribute everything globally because they've got such a powerful distribution network, right? For the winery, they don't have to have 180 distributors around the world. They just give it to the Bordelais, pay them 15% and see you later. You can understand that. But with Castellare, the negotiants, La Place, have decided to cherry pick. And so they've only taken Sodi.
That's interesting.
The San Niccolo, right? Which leaves you with 8 other wines that Castellare makes, including, Cognale, the Cabernet, a Merli, which is their Merlot.
The Merli,
The 3 Chiantis that they make, the Chianti Classical, Reserva, and the Poggiale.
You see, I battle with that because surely Paolo doesn't care, but whoever's next in line on the board of directors, surely they see a benefit, keep it in-house then. If they're not going to do everything, why just cherry pick? What's the benefit of all the other production? Unless Sodi, and today was a revelation. I had no idea of the size of the vineyards of Sodi. Possibly they've got a hell of a lot of wine, hell of a lot of Sodi relative to the price they're asking. So it makes sense to have a more efficient gateway for that label, possibly.
I would doubt it. I've seen the vineyard. Not that big.
Well, it says, it tells me here a sum total of 80 hectares. So, Lou, it must be a hell of a steep.
No, but that's
Yeah.
what, the Sodi vineyard itself? No,
Yeah,
all the vineyards.
No, they say Sodi's 80 hectares.
All right, we need to go back and check that because I've seen it and it didn't
Okay.
look like 80 hectares to me.
All right.
But we should check that.
All right.
But irrespective, and we'll fill in the dots there.
Yeah.
Irrespective, interesting to see how the French negotiants now are cherry picking some of the wines, right? And how it leaves the estates in terms of their marketing going forward is going to be very interesting. In fact, we've got Castellare coming out later on this month. I'll be interested to see how they handle it. Anyway, back to the wines.
All right. So again,
Luce, I got this Luce in my glass. Talk to me about.
So it's 45% Sangiovese. It's the one that has the most predominance of Merlot in Tuscany. And the one thing that I bring to the party on that note is that Merlot has been the most interesting varietal in the last 24 months that we've tasted up. Well, for me anyway, out of Tuscany. It's just the thing that just is bounding through in terms of quality. For me today, again, it's interesting, quite a variance of altitude here with the Luce, 280 to 420 meters, clay and yellow sandstone, which differentiates it a little bit from the limestone and clay of Sodi. The Pupille, by contrast, sandstone, they make a big deal about the iron content of the Fattoria, the Pupille, which brings all kinds of things to the party. The one tracer that I always look for with iron content rich soil is violets. It seems to be a dominant phenolic, and then also on the palate seems to play well.
Now that Merlot is really
of the Luce.
Yeah, lovely. See, this is the thing, right? I mean, how can you seriously put the ones to the left at 4 or 5 times the price of this? No, seriously.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because when we devised this tasting, I actually hadn't given the pricing a consideration. I was really just chasing the ratings, right? It's the thing I was trying to highlight, but it just bounds through. It's so obvious.
Bloody hell.
Looking at it now.
That's why the Italians are absolutely, carving everyone up out there at the moment. Makes sense.
I would argue that the Sodi, in contrast to the Luce, has less tannic prevalence, and that's got to be the Merlot, making that differential in the wine. For me, the softness of the Sangiovese in the Sodi is more clear at this stage than the Merlot in the Luce. Also, Malvasia, it's a really different animal to anything else that we're tasting in these three. I think the Malvasia, gosh, that Pupille is nice. Ooh. The Malvasia, I think, is the varietal that attracted the interest of the universities of Milan and Florence. There's one other academic institute, which I can't pronounce, and I didn't write down, that's also involved in the Sodi project. They like to call it an experiment. It's a very successful experiment. Really love the Pupille. I think for me, if it came down to Luce versus Pupille, I'd probably reach for the Pupille, just because of that. There's a kind of sassiness. There's a slickness about the Pupille that's really great.
And so again, the Saffredi is what? What's the blend?
The Saffredi is 70% Cab, 26 Merlot, and a little bit of Petit Verdot. The notes from the winery is that it's a relatively significant increase in Cabernet percentage for 19 relative to previous years. Excuse me. It's sort of hard to compare the Luce. It's not fair to compare the Luce and the Pupille, because the Cabernet is driving the Saffredi.
It's not fair. See, to my taste, I'm much preferring the Luce at this stage.
That tannin, possibly it's not overt, but there's for the percentage of tannin in the Luce It's interesting. I remember the 2010 was the shining lights, right? I think that 2010 Luce was the 100-pointer. It might have been the first year that it ever got 100 points. And I remember looking at it and thinking to myself that there was still a huge amount of tannin. I looked at it 2 years ago online during COVID with some people, and I think that's a marker of this particular label. The tannin's definitely sort of powdery tannin seems to be there all the time.
Well, it's a hallmark of Italian wines generally, right?
Yeah.
And they're not afraid of making their wines tannic.
Yeah.
Which
yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, the new world runs away from these days, much to their detriment, I believe, because it keeps it for structure. It gives it a backbone and structure that, I mean, they can go over the top. In the past, my criticism of my brothers in Italy was that it was just too tannic, right? And the old school Barolo, you could never, it was never approachable, ever. It was like sucking on a tree trunk. The thing would just never, ever, ever resolve. Now, with new winemaking techniques and European Parliament money in their pockets, they're making much more approachable, softer, and smarter wines. But the Italians have still got that hallmark backbone
of grunt
tannin, which I think, I hope they never lose that, because I think it's what defines them. And it's not obtrusive. It's not offensive. It's a marker.
Yeah. Well, I guess the premium assumption with Italian wine is you have to have it with food, right? It's and with that comes all kinds of constructs in your mouth, and the food is very much part of the wine experience, unlike many other parts of the world where people just drink wine.
Yeah, I got to tell you, and being an Italian Australian, most Australians don't understand that concept that Italians never ever just sit around having a glass of red. It's not what they do. It's just not what they do. They'll occasionally have a glass of white, but if they're going to just chit chat and fraternize, it's normally over a coffee. It's not like the rest of the sort of Western world that loves to just have a glass of wine and a natter. The Italians don't do that. It's not part of their culture.
Well, it's interesting because in Spain, it's a breakfast beer. You can be on the train at 8 in the morning and you're in the station cafe trying to get a coffee. Everyone's drinking beer.
Is that right?
So it's definitely not unusual to have breakfast beers.
Okay. Well,
I know that in Australia, breakfast beer was something you reserved for a Sunday after a big night out.
Yes.
With the Spanish, it's an everyday occurrence. And I'm talking about a Tuesday morning on the way to work in the middle of Barcelona. It's crazy. But,
yes, Australia was known as the breakfast of champions. It was the hair of the dog, basically. That was the...
Sam, that's your note on the Mesoria. Yeah, that's a wine that's gone up in price in the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, I really shouldn't complain too much about constant wine inflation, but that's one that's definitely, I think Mesorio and Macchiole are the two that really have soared up in recent years.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, you've had a lot more wine than Mesoria is unbelievable in my opinion. Yeah, and it's still surprising how many people who are serious wine drinkers have never had it, which I find interesting.
It's certainly lesser known than Macchiole, and way lesser known than the likes of Beyond Santi or any of those guys.
Or Masetto.
Yeah.
The one that's coming through now, and there's a great big cock measuring contest going on, is between Masetto and Baffonero from Rocca di Frassinello. So these are billionaires next door to each other in the Maremma, and trying to show who's got the biggest willy. And
isn't the Masetto a fair chunk up in cost?
Yeah,
Masetto about 900 to 1,000, and the Baffonero is about 400 or something like that.
Yeah,
I think
Masetto, you'll struggle to get it under $1,000 now.
I think that what Rocca should do is, and they can afford it, is make the Baffonero €1,000 a bottle.
Oh, don't worry, they're going to get there pretty quickly.
It's the best marketing thing they could ever do for that brand.
Yeah, and these guys all own yachts, and they get their yachts out with the big sails, their names on it, and all that sort of stuff. It's tremendous over exuberance of wealth. It's fantastic. Just communist dream. But yeah, those guys. So the Buffonero is making a big play in that space, but there's so many excellent Italian Merlots coming through. Just excellent.
So that tannic thing on the Luce has dissipated in the last 15 minutes.
It will.
Maybe it's my palate, but it's just a little bit more slick now. It's a little bit more, I don't know, it's just more finished than it was.
It's the Merlot. It's the Merlot in there, I'll tell you. Italian Merlot is just, from that part of the world, in that sort of western Tuscan region, they're just nailing it. Whatever they're doing it right. What's Gaia's version? What's he making?
They don't mess with that much Cabernet dominant.
He's not making a Merlot? I'm surprised.
I'm sure there's one that I don't. The guys that I drink are the Barbarescos when someone else is paying. And
which is the right way to do it, Rob.
Absolutely.
I'm a huge fan when I'm a guest. With the trilogy, I'm not sure what goes into them anymore. I can't remember. It's been such a while since I've drunk them.
The other one that comes to mind.
We should do an Italian Merlot tasting at some point, Rob. That'd be fun.
That'd be amazing. We'll have to get it sponsored by a private wealth bank or something to actually get the right wines. But yeah, I'm sure it's doable.
Yeah.
I think
I'm all for it.
It's interesting over time. The Sodi less sassy than the other two. A little bit softer, a little bit more calm than the other two for me. I'm still dyed in the wool Saffredi. I'm just obsessed with the Saffredi tonight.
I just drank the Californians again, just to compare it.
Oh yeah,
It's interesting that the concentration in Continuum really stands out to me.
The concentration of the Maya?
Of the Continuum, sorry.
Oh, yeah, of the Continuum.
Yeah, right. There's a different mouthfeel to it, but in a pleasant way, relative to even the Italian wines.
Mate, it's just easy. There's an ease about Continuum that just, I was wondering earlier in the tasting if my judgment was being clouded by just how much more interesting the wine is at this early stage than its library of work in previous years. But Jesus, it's nice. It's really, really nice.
So Mia, it's actually got it's got a texture that's thicker than the others. I'm just going back to
the Continuum.
Yeah.
Oh, for me, Maya is more dense. For me, the Maya is a denser texture.
No, I'm just comparing it to the Italian thing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
And so it's thicker and more, I guess, more velvety.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
So it sort of glides.
So, Lou, you're more knowledgeable about Malvasia than I am. What is it bringing to the party? What's it closest to in international varietal terms?
Really?
Bordeaux?
No.
So it's not bringing that peppery intensity.
You tested me now. I'm trying.
Okay, sorry. It's not.
I'd rather not make that up.
Okay, it's not a varietal that's bringing floral attributes. It's not something that's bringing floral phenolics or anything. I'm not.
No, it's a traditional grape from that region, which I know Alessandro Cellai, the winemaker, is very, very proud that he's got one of the few vineyards left of it.
Yeah.
And because of the big movement in Italy over the last 10 years to preserve historical vines, it's become a big thing for him. No, I'd have to come back to you about what it is.
It's just interesting because certainly it's, I'd say that the Saffredi is the most international in style of the three. And I'd say that the Castellare is certainly the truest to form, which makes sense. They're both indigenous varietals to Italy.
Well, of all these, the only one that's pure Italian varietal is the Sodi.
Yeah.
And it's
How does the Merli stack up price wise? 135, I think.
it's
Definitely
a little bit more expensive than
the Niccolo, the Sodi.
the San Niccolo, but I would expect that by the time the French put their paws all over this next year, that would change.
All right.
Because the guys from La Place, they'll give you good introductory prices, and then they start marching it up every year.
Yeah.
But I encourage anyone who hasn't tried the a Merli from Castellare to have a glass. It is a wondrous Merlot, absolutely wondrous, and it's in the hands of a winemaker, Alessandro, who, he's got a new world mentality in the way he makes wines. So that fruit in the hands of someone who's looking to make the fruit shine, geez, he does it well. He does it well. He really does. But it's tiny production. I mean, tiny.
Taking Sam's cue and going back to the Napas, the Opus is the one that's least interesting now relative to everything else. It seems to be a little quieter, a little less exuberant, not so much layering going on. The Maya seems to be softer, and there's more of a sense of roundness in the mid palate as opposed to the elbows out. It's definitely evolved in the 45 minutes or so, hour or so that it's been open. So, guys, a favorite out of the Italians? It's harder to pick, right? Because their attributes are also different relative to the Californian, which are sort of more closely aligned stylistically.
For me, Luce always.
Luce. Yeah. Mate, have you had the very top label from them? I've only had it once or twice. It's that same sun emblem, but I think we've sold it one or two vintages, but I never had a chance to buy any with the
I bought one, but I've never drunk it.
Oh, okay.
What's it called? Brunello. It's the Brunello. It's Luce Brunello. This is the
there's a super premium IGT above the Luce, and I'm sure we've sold it. If not, I've just drunk it again as a guest of somebody else. But I've always thought it. Okay, so 100% Sangiovese Brunello.
They do a Brunello.
Right.
They do this.
Then there's a Rosso of some kind.
There's one down, but the difference in the label is that it's still got the sort of sun thing, but the Brunello has got all white.
Okay, I've confused it with something.
Yeah, the white one is the Brunello. That's the one I had.
Okay.
The sun, the lines are white.
Yes.
And price-wise,
I've never drunk it though.
Does it sit? I always thought it was as expensive, if not more, than the IGT, or similar.
It's about the same.
Right. Okay. The big shock for me last week was seeing Biondi Santi Rossa di Montalcino 2019 on a restaurant wine list for €360.
It's a joke. It's embarrassing.
Are you serious? Is it because the old man died? Please tell me that's not the reason.
Well, yeah, I think the reason why people are doing that now is they're drawing a big dividing line between, the previous generation and the young punks who've sold out to some hedge fund or something.
Yeah.
But I really laughed, and I it was just so ridiculously overpriced relative to everything else.
I've had the pleasure of some of the Brunellos. They're clearly unbelievable wines.
Magnificent.
But I mean, now the pricing is intolerable. It cannot be done.
The last time Lou and I were in Italy, it was so interesting because we were wandering around the wine exhibition, and somebody said to me that, of course, everyone detests everyone at Biondi Santi because they're all so rich and they've made so much money. It's so funny. But apparently all the staff were wearing Giorgio Armani, and somebody said to me, "It's not Temporio, it's the real Giorgio Armani." It was very funny. So everybody in Italy is kind of jealous. I mean, they got it right? It's extraordinary wine. It's so much money for what you get.
And they're so hated. So hated.
Really on. Someone was talking about it's not unlike another story that Lou and I came across in New Zealand many years ago now, about 10 years ago, where people were flying in and out of the vineyard by helicopters. So frequently they were upsetting the bird life and upsetting everybody because these helicopters were landing full of rich Americans every 20 minutes in the middle of summer to buy the Brunellos from Biondi. Anyway, guys, a terrific tasting. Thank you so much for hooking up with us tonight. It's been really great. I appreciate it. This will be, I think, the last online tasting we have this year. Now that we're into the silly season, there's a Castellare dinner in 2 weeks, Thursday the 17th, I think it is. If you want to look at that Sodi, along with the entire body of work that we have currently on the island. They also own a Sicilian brand called Feudi, which we sell a lot of, not because of its relationship with Castellare, but it's just a really successful label all on its own for us. So it's going to be good to see the Feudi wines. There's a Nero and Lou, which ones are we looking at? Just the Nero or?
Yeah, otherwise it's going to be too many wines.
Yeah, there's about 5 of them, I think.
They do a total of 6 because it's all that designer collection stuff. So the Nero is the Versace label.
Right.
And shut up, cat. No, there's just too many for me to stack them up.
Put together, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's clearly not a Versace fan in the background.
No. But the Fuedis are their Sicilian vineyards.
Yeah.
Which are a totally different animal, but sort of cool.
So their Asia brand manager is going to be with us, and he'll be doing all the talking. We're doing that at No Menu in Chinatown in 2 weeks' time. So thank you, one and all. It was a great night. Thank you so much. And if
did we get a consensus of who likes what?
Oh yes, let's do an absolutely final vote. So votes for number 1. Just stick it in the chat if you don't want to.
Luce for me.
Okay, so it's number 4.
Yeah. For me, it's Luce or Saffredi.
Saffredi, okay.
All right, you guys, listen, I'm going to fly the flag for Italy now. It's Luce, okay?
It means light.
I was wondering how long it would take him to get riled up by that pronunciation.
Well, you just said Di Valle, all right? It's all about light. It's Luce.
So any more votes? I'm going to go Continuum. I think it's incredible.
I agree. I much to my surprise, I would agree.
Yeah.
If I had not seen the price labels,
exactly.
Then I would have picked Continuum. But once you get the price, then the game changes.
Yeah. Sadly for me, Opus is the least interesting. Hate to be that judgy, but it's the one that's least, like in a blind, it's the one that I would go back to the least out of these 6.
Well, the other thing is, Rob, with the Opus, you've got 80 French wines you can pick off the shelf that give you more or less that.
Yeah. In fact, you could probably get a 6-pack.
Yeah, right.
For that sort of price point. Yeah.
For me, all around, I agree with you guys. I think Continuum was probably the most surprising wine.
Yeah.
But hands down on a value quality ratio, Luce.
Yeah.
Just
it's
nails.
Fabulous. Yeah. Pretty good. All right. Thank you, everybody. Ciao tutti. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank
you for sharing.
See you all. Bye.
See you guys.
I will see you anyway at Meat Smith next week, I guess.
Oh, yes. We don't have enough seats sold, so I'm not sure about that. What I might do, Sid, is I might repackage it after Chinese New Year and try to persuade the winery to give us a better price for the wine. So we might be able to get that price down to a little bit closer to 140, which might be more workable in terms of sales. So leave it with me. I'll let you know by Sunday at the latest. That's the last time we can make a call on that.
Sure.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay.
See
Thanks.
you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.